So when you talk about the Nintendo Switch, we're really in unprecedented territory in terms of sales numbers, guys. This console is about to cross 80 million units sold since launch in 2017, and that is absolutely insane, and it's coming up quickly on the heels of Nintendo's previously most successful console, which was the Nintendo Wii. And now what they did with the Switch is they obviously merged their handheld market and their home console market together by making this hybrid system. And then since we've seen the Switch Lite, we are now seeing more and more potential 3DS remakes or re-releases on the Switch come over. And so today, what we got to talk about is the games that would do the best on the Nintendo Switch coming over from the 3DS, and ones that let's hope Nintendo's already working on, but that they should at least take notice and put these games on the most successful platform that they've ever created. What's up, Nation? If it's your first time on the channel, make sure you join Sunbro Nation by subscribing below. Hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. Now, guys, today we're going to be talking about the 3DS games that we need to see released on the Nintendo Switch. Nintendo Switch is obviously Nintendo's most successful platform to date, and we do think that they will pass the Wii this year, especially if you actually see them go ahead and release the Switch Pro like we're rumoring to be, seeing at the end of this year. So if that happens, I think there's no way that by the end of their fiscal year, which would end in March of 2022, that they're not past that additional 20 million units that they need to pass the 100 million of the Wii's entire life cycle, which is absolutely incredible. And with that comes the opportunity for Nintendo to really capitalize on some different software that they've released on the 3DS, because we're already seeing this start to pop up. We had the Nintendo Direct in February that did actually outline some of Nintendo's games for the first half of 2021, but we know that basically the work from home mandate in Japan really crippled things for about 6 to 9, maybe even as long as 12 months when it comes to game development. So we are seeing a bunch of projects that probably would have been further along just now being announced. Now, one of which that kind of sparked this idea for the video is we did recently get Miitopia confirmed to be coming over from the 3DS, an actual port, a true up port to the Switch, and it is something that obviously Nintendo is picking that title to see how it does on the Switch, but I think why not pick some of the other big hitters that sold really well on the 3DS, or maybe could have even sold better if they had the kind of install base that we're seeing with the Nintendo Switch, and then maybe even the Switch Pro going forward. So we're starting with the games right now on what I think is most likely, and we'll kind of go in the order of which ones we may not see, but we're only talking like 6 or 7 games here, guys, so the ones that I'm going to mention in today's video to keep it quick and concise. But guys, there's some fantastic titles to be had when it comes to the 3DS library, and we got to dive through which ones we think we will see on the Switch. So you hear a lot about 35th anniversaries recently due to Mario and Zelda both celebrating theirs, but one that gets left out a lot is another huge franchise for Nintendo, and while it doesn't have the same sales numbers and advertising dollars that Mario and Zelda do, it is a beloved fan favorite title, and that is Metroid. Now, on the 3DS, we got Metroid Samus Returns released in 2017, and this game looks incredible already. All you need to do is up-res the resolution, because obviously in a handheld mode, you're really downscaling that, and you can even see the pixels when you're playing through it. But if you were just to simply give this thing some HD textures and up-res it to 1080p, hopefully 4K in docked if we see the Switch Pro, this game would play phenomenally on the Nintendo Switch, and it's going to be a super easy port, as it did not rely too heavily on like touch controls and things like that. It was more optimized for your menu and item selection, and not so much on the core gameplay itself. And I do think that is actually a factor on which games we see ported over, because if you have some that are a lot harder to port, like I'll use, it's not 3DS, but DS rather, both the Spirit Tracks and Phantom Hourglass relied entirely on touch controls for your main portion of the control scheme. That's obviously going to take a lot more work than something like a Metroid Samus Returns, where it's more or less ready to go as a platformer, shooter, exploration game, and it's all primarily tied to the buttons already. So this is a super easy port, and one that I hope we see soon, because like I said, it is Metroid's 35th anniversary as well, and there's no telling if Nintendo really does the same acknowledgement for that series or not, but hopefully they could at least give the hardcore fans, what they want as far as a 2D Metroid game, hopefully a Prime trilogy at some point, and then the big, blockbuster will be whenever we get more news on Metroid Prime 4, but this is my first game that I think does need to come to the Nintendo Switch, and let's hope we see it rather soon in a future Nintendo Direct announcement. And then the next game on this list is actually one that I think we will see for sure at some point, but the question is how is Nintendo actually going to handle it? And I'm hoping it is a double pack, but that is your Ocarina of Time 3DS Remaster and Majora's Mask 3DS Remaster. If they pulled these games over to the Nintendo Switch, they would sell phenomenally, and I do think that you can make a case that these games should be packaged together in one cartridge. And while there is rumors that this could be one of the Zelda 35th titles, there's obviously nothing confirmed yet, and there was actually rumors that maybe Ocarina of Time would just get its own standalone from the ground up remake, which would also be amazing. And I think if they actually rework the visuals from the base level of the Switch and what it can handle in Ocarina of Time, I would be happy to pay $60 for just that game. However, if we get the 3DS version and it's just upscaled to HD, which I do think is totally possible, I think that then at that point Nintendo should give us both the Ocarina of Time 3DS HD version and the Majora's Mask HD version together, as these games were previously sold for $40 a piece on the 3DS, and I think that since the games work so well together, they should be packaged as one on the Nintendo Switch. And I think that this title definitely makes sense for games that we could see announced for Zelda's 35th anniversary, and even if it doesn't happen in that time window, I would predict that this will come sometime down the line, and it definitely needs to, because since Breath of the Wild, there has been an entire new generation of Zelda fans that have been created from that amazing performance of that game, and they need to go back and play these fundamental classics to the series to see really what the evolution of Zelda games truly are and where all these giant ideas came from. And so I do think that both of these games are pivotal to that, and I do hope that this is actually something that we will see Nintendo officially confirm this year for ports coming to the Switch. And while we're talking about Zelda real quick, there's another game we got to mention that did incredibly well on the 3DS, and it is an amazing experience from start to finish, and that is Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. And while I do think this starts to fall into the slightly less likely category, I do still think there is a shot that maybe down the road, if not right away, we will see this game officially ported over. We do know that Grezzo is hiring for probably a Zelda title. It's not confirmed to be a Zelda title, but by the description of what they're hiring for, they're probably a couple years out from releasing another 2D port of Zelda, and it very well could be A Link Between Worlds. In a perfect world, I would like to see Nintendo actually package this with A Link to the Past, and then you can maybe have both adventures to play through on a single cartridge if they actually remastered A Link to the Past as well. Because if you guys don't know, A Link Between Worlds is very much a kind of a half remake slash just heavily inspired by. It's essentially in the same overworld of A Link to the Past, which is of course one of the all-time Zelda fan favorites in the series. So I do think it would make sense to give us the option to play through both these games together, and it's another one that you don't have to put a whole lot of work into because the visuals are already incredible. There's some new gameplay mechanics where you go kind of like 2D into the wall as Link, and there's a bunch of unique puzzles that came along with that gameplay change. So I think that this is another one that does incredibly well if Nintendo, slows down and does a remake from the ground up in HD, and really just upscales, does the HD textures and upscales the resolution. And this is another one that's easy to port over and not too heavily reliant on the touch controls. So another one that makes perfect sense for Nintendo to bring over to the Switch. So the next one is kind of more of a nostalgic title for me, as if you were a fan of Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island, they made a dedicated sequel to that is called New Yoshi's Island on the 3DS. And while I'm not entirely sure how this game sold, I do think that anything with Baby Mario and Yoshi on the cover on the Nintendo Switch will sell very well, and it is definitely a different style Mario game. Well, that's why they kind of, ditched the Mario name. Whenever they did Super Mario World 2, it was kind of a different direction that they were going with the gameplay, just to test out, and it kind of ultimately turned into a Yoshi Star as opposed to Baby Mario, how it was originally. But they are a team together. You basically have eggs that you pick up that you can aim at enemies, and there's different styles of platforming and puzzles that go along with this. And I do think that, again, you're in a scenario where it's going to be easier to port this game over. The visuals already look fantastic, and it's going to be an easy up-res that could be, ported over to the Switch, and really needs to for any of the hardcore hardcore Mario fans out there, because I think this style of gameplay is absolutely phenomenal, and it does a good job of still being in the Mario universe and having that great level design and great art style, but you still are able to experience it in an entirely different way with these altered gameplay controls and altered enemies and boss battles and things. And so from start to finish, this is a very enjoyable game, and one that, while there's no telling if Nintendo will port this over, it would be one that I would definitely welcome and would pick up on the Switch if we saw them put the work in to bring over new Yoshi's Island to the Nintendo Switch. I haven't always been the biggest Kirby fan over time, but I do think that Kirby Triple Deluxe was a game that was fantastic on the 3DS and could absolutely be brought over to the Switch to have a second run, because there are a ton of hardcore Kirby fans out there that do enjoy these games. It's also a very easily accessible game if you're playing with your kid or you're just starting out in video games for the first time. Kirby's one of those series that, while there is challenges and things, it is a very, hand-holding in the sense that you can, kind of work through the game easily and not just be met with incredible difficulty. So if you like to relax and play, a game kind of sitting back and less intense, but then still have a great art style, great combat, and level exploration, I do think that this one absolutely makes sense to bring over to the Switch at some point in time. And hopefully we'll see some more future sequels, even mainline sequels for Kirby, because I don't think we've seen very much from him recently at all, and this could easily be one of those surprise drops that Nintendo does at a direct, and they're saying, oh, you know what, hey, it's available today, or it's available 2 months from now. So I do think we could at some point in the future see something like a Kirby Triple Deluxe, or even just a new game entirely, but that's still kind of in that 3DS style of graphics, come over to the Switch. And the last game we're talking about today is none other than Kid Icarus Uprising, which I do think should come to the Switch personally. However, it falls into the slightly less likely category just simply because it did not perform well when it comes to sales numbers on the 3DS. However, I do think that with Smash Bros. And the visibility of Pit and in Smash Ultimate and all the new fans that have probably, grown to know the character, I do think Nintendo should give this a second shot and bring it over to the Switch with some revised controls, because this is a very unique type of game. It's kind of like a third-person shooter in a way, but the way that they have the boss battles and the levels structured and the exploration part of it, it's really a fast-paced, like super cool RPG style game that I think that fans would really enjoy. And I don't think that Kid Icarus gets the love that it deserves from Nintendo, because this was actually an original NES franchise. You can trace it back all the way there, and outside of Kid Icarus Uprising, we've really never seen anything else that's its own dedicated single-player game when it comes to focusing on Pit. He's made cameos and different things, but he hasn't been, the front and center, iconic character like we know that he could be. So I think if this comes to the Switch, it'll certainly do better than it did on the 3DS, especially if Nintendo, reworks the graphics and actually gives, some better control schemes in certain parts, and makes that really translate over well to the Switch. You could probably even do something in there with motion controls on the Joy-Con. So it'll be interesting to see if they do pick this title. I would absolutely be happy to buy it if they do release it, but this is going to be one more in the long shot area. But I'm hoping that we see Nintendo do a bunch of 3DS ports, and I would love to know what your guys' thoughts are. Are there games that we didn't talk about today that you would absolutely love to see come over? Or of some of the games I did mention, what is your number one most game that you would want to see come to the Nintendo Switch from the 3DS? I would love to get a back and forth conversation started with you guys, so please make sure you leave a comment for me on your way out on this video, and I do look forward to discussing the 3DS games that we hope to see on the Nintendo Switch one day going forward. Thanks so much for watching the video today, everyone. I do truly appreciate you all sticking around until the end. I do at this point in the video want to invite you all one more time to join Sunbro Nation if you haven't done so already. Do so by subscribing below, hit the like button on your way out on this video if you enjoyed it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. Guys, that's going to do it for me. I hope you all have a great day. Sunbro Nation, out.